What is going on, you guys? My name is Cody Thixton, and this is Interesting Podcast. We are coming to you guys live on July 17th, 2024 for episode 101, where today I actually have a very, very special guest. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolute pleasure to bring to you guys Seven Alexander.
Hello, hello. Wow, with that introduction, like I'm nervous now. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh man, it is an absolute pleasure for you to actually come and sit down with me. Thank you so very much.
No, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
All right, well, let's just start out for everybody who maybe doesn't know you. Maybe you can introduce your name, where you're from, and when did you actually start watching professional wrestling?
Hmm. So I am Seven Alexander. I am a photographer, a professional wrestling photographer for the Pacific Northwest. I am originally from Tucson, Arizona, and I am currently residing in Portland, Oregon. Um, And I actually, there's two stories about how I started watching just as a fan. The first one being my grandparents. I was very young. We're talking circa like 1994. And I don't remember anything else except for Flying Brian. Um, because there was, my parents or my grandparents really liked him. And I just remember watching him and he being very captivating. So that's how I kind of started watching it. But then, like, they would change the channel sometimes, so it wasn't like I was able to give it my undivided attention and really become a fan or really remember anything. I do remember Flying Brian always wearing red for some reason. I don't know if that's even true, but in my mind, that's what it used to be. It wasn't until 1998 that I actually watched just as a fan and on my own. And I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but what got me started watching was they were introducing, I was flipping through channels, and it was the free-for-all for Unforgiven 1998 after WrestleMania. It was going to be Sable versus Luna Vachon in a evening gown match, which I didn't care so much about the evening gown match at all, as much as these two women. You have Luna, who's like super strong, this really cool braided hair, face markings, and then you had Sable, who was a bombshell, and they're going to go out and fight. I was sold. But there was nothing else that needed to happen. I watched it. I begged my mom. I was in high school. I just started high school. And I begged my mom to let us watch it. And she finally gave in because she's like, you don't even like wrestling. I'm like, yeah, that's true, but I do now. As of 5 minutes ago, I'm the biggest fan of it. And then that's kind of how it started. And then I kind of stopped watching in about 2005 for a little bit. And then the pandemic hit, and then I started watching again.
That is really, really interesting. So, like, do you kind of like remember your old school like favorite wrestlers back before 2005 when you kind of slipped off? Did you have any like favorites during that period?
Yeah, so at that time, obviously streaming services weren't there, but I was always a huge fan of like the indie wrestling. If there was like a small indie wrestling company that was there, because I don't just like something, I have to be part of it. Like, I don't know if it's the touch of the tism or the ADHD, but if it's something that I like, I have to be involved in it whatsoever. So yeah, I would go watch obsessively. But we didn't have like a lot of independence, so I didn't know a lot of things. So I would have to read magazines. I would get all of them, like PWI, Raw. But the only thing that we had access to at that time was WCW and WWE. We would only get the pay-per-views for ECW. I am the biggest ECW mark that you would ever meet. And I'd only get to watch like the pay-per-views. So my favorites were always the Jerry Lynn's, the Super Crazy. I gotta love, as far as mic skills, you gotta give it up to the Queen of Extreme, Francine, the head cheerleader. Um, and then for like WWE, I love China. I love Triple H. But I was really, really drawn to the ECW fan base, and it was just wild at that time. It blew my mind, especially back then.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I think it was like 2005 in which WWE purchased ECW and then they tried to rebrand it. Were you one of those people that was maybe against that whole rebranding and trying to make it what it wasn't?
Yes, I was, but I wasn't. When it first came out, I think at that '05, and once we get to the training part, I'll go into a little bit of why I stopped watching at '05
Mhm.
around that time. But there was definitely a time where I was super excited because ECW was my ultimate favorite. And I was like, okay, they're bringing it back. This is my dream come true. And then I saw it, and it was just like a Jacked or a Heat. It was performed before a Raw or a SmackDown. And to me, it took all of the nostalgia out of it. So it wasn't the same thing. Although I appreciated what it was,
Mhm.
it was unfair to call it ECW, and I feel like it tarnished that name a little bit. But at the same time, wrestling is great. Wrestling should be on TV all the time, and so people have that access. So I'm never going to hate on a show. I do feel a little jaded, like, you probably shouldn't have called it that.
Yeah. So like what was your first reaction to that like amazing Hall of Fame speech by Paul Heyman?
I loved it. Like I thought it was awesome. I liked Paulie always. I loved him on commentary back in the day. I love him. I mean, he is a genius in this business. I don't think anybody can deny that. Sorry, my dog's making a special appearance.
No, that's all good. That is so awesome. So, let's kind of start to talk about Oregon Pro Wrestling School. So, can you kind of like walk us through your mindset as you were actually entering those doors? Like, were you excited? Were you nervous? Like, how were you feeling entering those doors?
All things can be true. So before that, actually, when I was 18, I had started, or no, I think I was 17. There was a small school in Tucson, Arizona. It ran World Wrestling Alliance, I think it was. They had actually a lot of good talent, but the ring, when I say training, it was not the type of training that you would think of. It definitely was not. It was outside in a yard in a ring. It was very hot in summer. But then I don't know what kind of happened. Like it just fell off, and there was no place for me to train at going forward. So I had stopped. And as I said earlier, if I'm not able to do something or be part of it, I lost interest. So back in the pandemic days, I got into it like just randomly. They had the show NXT had a show in Portland, and I hadn't watched in what like 15 years, so I had no idea what it was. But I was like, oh, it's in Portland. Like that's cool. I just moved here like
Mhm.
3 months before, so I'm gonna watch it, and I fell in love with it. Like the landscape had completely changed. It was the black and gold era. The pandemic was just about to hit, and then that was enough time for me to rekindle my love for pro wrestling. And of course, like anything else, I need to be part of it somehow. And so, like a couple of months late, or no, I think it was like a year. June 23rd is when we all started. I was the first class, the first day that it opened. Um, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I'm like, I don't know who's going to be there. I don't know how it's going to go down. Like, I'm a bigger person already. I'm already a little bit older than everybody else. But at that moment, I was like, no, I'm going to do this for me. Like, I don't care what happens with it. I want to be part of this somehow. And just walking into those doors, the first person that I met was obviously Ricky. And then I believe it was Amira. And I don't think Zay was there quite yet. But Mark was there. Or I'm sorry, not Mark.
King Nanja.
Yes, correct. I was gonna try to play that one off, but here we are live. What can you do? Sorry, King.
Oh. Yeah. Apologize, man.
Yeah.
No, so like how was it like actually meeting Ricky Gibson like for the first time? Did he kind of like help you feel not as nervous kind of going into each session?
Ricky is he is an amazing coach. Me and Stevie Bay Knox, who is the queen of the Pacific Northwest as far as ring announcing it is, as far as I'm concerned. We actually call him Dad, just because I don't know if he even knows this. So if he hears this is going to be really embarrassing. But for both of us, he was very much a father figure. Even though I'm older than him, I looked up to him, and like his presence I really like gravitated towards because it was like a calming thing, and I was like, hey, he's teaching us these great things. Um, so yeah, like he was very instrumental to being like, okay, you need to do this, and if I had any concerns or whatsoever, like I would be that person at 11 o'clock thinking after training, be like, hey, did I do this okay? And he would actually answer back. Like I wouldn't expect that until like the next day or something, but he was like, yeah, like anybody that you're going to go train in, if you're in this area, you definitely got to go check out Oregon Pro. There's so many like great performers that are now out, and then just the upcoming class is going to be pretty amazing.
That is really, really awesome. So, like, can you kind of like walk us through like your whole experience there at Oregon Pro Wrestling?
Yeah, so we started off as the beginning class, which was Monday and Tuesday, and then or Monday and Wednesday. And then I remember Amira and a few others definitely lobbied to do Tuesdays, so we stepped up for 3 days a week. Tuesdays are the intermediate, and then Fridays were kind of just going over it. I was there for about 4 months before got injured and took myself out. But it was really cool because they taught you everything, the basics, fundamentals, and that like I still carry a lot of. And they'll teach you like how to handle yourself backstage and stuff. And that actually still to this day, like things that they've told me about how you handle yourself with other performers and stuff, I still take to me this day. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So like how does it feel to cuz like sometimes I've seen on like social media or whatever some wrestlers talking about certain wrestlers being unprofessional or poorly trained. How does it feel to know that like you're carrying that same professionalism because of the fact that they taught you the fundamentals of how to carry yourself backstage or how to do everything? How was that looking back on?
Well, you don't want to disappoint dad. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to is like, I would never, like, I owe them everything that I have in this business, right? They got me started. They're the first ones that took me up to Defy to do ring crew. They were the first ones that took me to everywhere that I went and was introduced to these amazing people where I have. So, like, I am very self conscious about everything I say, everything I post, everything I do. And maybe self conscious isn't the word, but I'm very vigilant about, like, is this going to be perceived wrong? Is this going to be not necessarily just because I don't want to disappoint like Ricky and all of them. I also just want to be like, yeah, I originally trained with them. They taught me this, and I wouldn't say that because I don't like I don't want Ricky to be like, oh, don't say my name. But like, I definitely wanted, I definitely want to be a representation of like, hey, this is the type of things that they're training type of thing. But for me, it's just like making sure you handle yourself well. Don't be unprofessional. Don't be late. Although there have been a couple times where I've been in a car and we had to be a little late, and that's the constant anxiety right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just taking what they've taught you and just moving it forward and hoping expanding it. And the one thing I will say that they have always like have open arms for everybody, and that is something that I have kept through even when I'm doing just photos or whatnot. Like, hey, if you can give a helping hand, do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I also feel like kind of hand in hand with that. It's also a matter of you having so much respect for what they teach you and actually having pride in who taught you those things that you're like I am always going to carry these things because you gave me that opportunity. Like I find that so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, they give you an opportunity, and it's up to you to capitalize on it, right? Just like any wrestler or any type of thing that you do in this field. Um, I just yeah, like I want to just make them proud, even though I'm not one of their students currently, and obviously I'm not wrestling, but like I keep those in mind, and I always like try to make them proud.
Mhm. That is so interesting. So, can you kind of like walk us through exactly when you started getting into photography? Was it before professional wrestling or was that after?
So I've always loved photography. The thing is, I was never able to afford like a real camera at the time, but like I would go to concerts like what really installed it is I went to this concert with my brother, and I was taking pictures, and they jumped into the crowd, and I'm taking these on my like iPhone 6 or whatever it was. Probably not the best quality, but at that time it was, and I was like able to manipulate it, and I was like, wow, I really really like photography, and I love everything about it. And then, like, like most things, it kind of goes on and you move on. It wasn't until like after like I had gotten injured, and then we kind of was like, all right, I want to stay in the business. How can I stay in the business? And I was like, I really like photography, and it just something clicked in me. And then, yeah, that's kind of how it got into it. I will tell a story. Referee Brad got me really my first start. Like I owe him a lot because he literally gave me timber. He's like, hey, or I was like, hey, I really want to shoot. I just want to test it out. I'll go buy a camera. It's still the same camera that I shoot off of now. Like I was like, Amazon, I'm gonna get one. I'm gonna see what I can do with it, and just as a test. And I was like, all right, not the best camera, not the best lens, but I'm just gonna go with it and try to learn from it. I can get it as I go. So I've upgraded some of my stuff. I made a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, that's more or less how I got started in it, was because Brad gave me an opportunity.
That is so interesting. Well, one more thing that I want to ask you about OPWS before we start to get a little bit more into photography is like, how did it feel for you as a professional wrestling fan to then be sitting outside of the ring and maybe even just watching two people coordinate with each other and just being behind those closed doors in a
Mhm.
sense? Because unless you're going to the school, you're not going to be exposed to those experiences. How is that for you?
So when I first trained when I was like 18, there wasn't any type of like, this is how you behave, this is what you need to do. There was no real structure. And that's not like anything on the trainers back there or the people that I was training with. It's just we didn't know back then, like, right? Like it was
Mhm.
a small area. So going from that and having learned a little bit there, and then going to Ricky's school, completely different. You have structure, you know what they're working on. Um, it was interesting to see like how they told you to conduct yourself was something that I latched onto, I think, because it taught you how to do business in this business. So from a fan perspective, that's a really hard question for me to respond to, because I had that like little bit of training beforehand, like when I first started to be a fan. Up
Mhm.
until then, like I always knew mouth shut, head down, eyes open, ears open. That's just how it was. And um, there were definitely wow moments when we went to the seminars through Oregon Pro that we've done. Being able to be like sitting across from like, I don't want to name drop, but like Lance Archer, like that was my first like experience meeting somebody. I was like, oh,
Wow.
you're really tall. So yeah, that was some really cool stuff. Just being able to like peel the curtain back, so to speak, and just be in it versus hearing about it, and that was really cool for me.
That is so interesting. Well, like, what were your like? Hold on. Let's go through like every company that you've worked for as a photographer. Like, can you walk us through maybe your first company and then maybe it leading up as far as like a ladder to where you are today?
So I am somebody who has probably a lot of social anxiety, so I don't put myself out there as much as I should. The first company that I worked for is Timber, and I worked with them up until their closing. And then again, Ref Brad was like, "Hey, do you want to go to San Diego with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, of course. What are we doing?" And like I wasn't even sure. He's like, "I can get you booked," and I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then Suna, who is the goat for pictures and photography, she helped me out a lot. Like she was like, "Hey, I'm stepping back from doing Reactivate. Are you interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's like 3 hours away, but yeah, I'll do the drive, no problem." And then just from then, it just kind of snowballed. I did a DOA, but mostly I do Reactivate. I am doing the Pacific Death uh, show that Brad is putting on, which I'm super, super excited about. Uh, Pacific North the Death, I believe it's called, is the full term. Like I think first row is already almost sold out, so definitely go get your tickets.
Very, very interesting. That's crazy. Um,
Yeah.
so what is like some of your favorite pictures that you've ever taken where like you kind of looked at and you were like, man, that was just perfect?
There's very few of those because because I am probably my worst critic. Like I am the hardest. Like people will love it, and I can tell kind of like where people land on it by the likes that they have. Where if they repost it, like that's kind of how I am. But I like literally, I'm the worst person to ask because if you were to ask me, I'd be like, oh, none of them. I don't like any of them. But there are certain ones like it has to be like Drexel always will give you. He's always serving face, right? Like he's knows how to pose for the camera when he comes out. Funny Bone is completely another one. Sue Young, they all know how to work the camera without even looking at the camera, and that is an amazing talent that I think that a lot of people don't know how to do, or not, I don't want to say know how, but know to do. It's those extra pauses that allow the photographers and even the cameras to pick up on to really sell that moment. And those three, and don't get me wrong, there's tons and tons of more. But those three, out of my experience, like I know I'm going to have an easy shoot because they know the poses to do perfectly. Not poses, but they know how to take the moment from what they just did and really be able to present it, and it makes it easy for us to capture.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had just said that somebody asked you if they could or if you wanted to replace them at reactive. So like
Suna.
was there anything that they had kind of told you as far as like advice that you really that had like really stuck with you before you went to that company?
Yeah, it was about lighting. Because it's a really dark venue. They have lighting. Sometimes they'll have like the different colors on. And she was like, "Hey, use your flash." Um, and you just manipulate it, and like that helped me out a lot. Although now I kind of use the flash, sometimes I don't. Like you learn your own tricks of the trade, but like I give so much respect to Suna because she's always the first one to be like, hey, this place is looking for a photographer. Like she really looks out for people, and I owe her so much too. I owe a lot of people a lot.
I was like just sitting here thinking, so you know how like back in the day when people would buy those disposable cameras and then
Yeah,
they would have the flash and they'd be sitting in WWE and it would just go off all over the crowd.
yeah,
Um, I think it would be amazing if like today if people still use their flash just so that
yeah.
then when people make their entrance and maybe go and pose on the turnbuckle. It just goes all over for pictures. I think that would be amazing, and it's definitely an aspect as far as that photography or entrances that I really miss. It sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an error. Like you think back and you think of the flashes. Who
Mhm,
do you think of? You think of like the Attitude Era or even Ruthless Aggression Era. I
mhm.
mean, it speaks to you, and that's why fan wrestling is so cool because it's not just like, oh, you like the action. You literally follow it from air to air, decade to decade, and
Mhm.
that's something that most TV shows, most sports, well, I guess a little bit football, but it's a rare community. Even though sometimes the wrestling fandom can be toxic, I think that people are so toxic about it because it's something that they're so passionate about. So can you really knock it? Yeah, don't be a jerk, but but like yeah, I kind of get it, I guess.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So, like, how is it for you, like, whenever you're actually taking photos of a match and, like, maybe you're, like, hanging up on, like, the ring apron? Like, how does it feel to be, like, that close to the action and, like, you can get, like, just perfect shots being that close?
Um, so there's a few things that you have to watch out for because a lot of times like the ring bounces, the ropes like ricochet off. So you got to be careful of like how close you are, and you have to kind of predict like is wrestler A going to throw wrestler B towards the ring post, and do you have to move? So you're always like kind of like thinking like what's coming next, or like you obviously don't want to ruin anything and be like, oh, they're going to be thrown out, and then you're in the way, So you always
Mhm.
I'm always like trying to move around and kind of like take that picture, but it's also an awesome feeling because you can feel the hits because you can feel the ring bump up against you when they're hitting the ropes. It's probably the closest that you can be without being a wrestler next to a ref, and that's pretty cool for me. Like and this is going to sound weird, even though you're up close, your whole goal is not to be noticed by the fans, by the talent. So some of the like biggest compliments are like, oh, I didn't even see you. Like those are, I'm like, thank you. That's most people want to be seen, but in this instance, you definitely being told that is an odd compliment.
That is so interesting. Yeah. So like do you kind of like take the I wouldn't say like promo shots, but like what do you call those? Where like they're kind of just like posing, wanting to create a new 8x10. Have you done those for previous superstars?
Yeah, I love doing those. A lot of times 8x10, they are like headshots, promo shots.
There you
I just did one for, I'm gonna blank his name, for somebody. And I really like the way that it comes out. Like if I absolutely love doing the headshots. Like at Pacific North Death, I'm going to be doing like a portfolio type thing where it's going to be your before shot and then your after shot of the death match. So I'm
go.
so looking forward to that. I love anything where I'm going to be able to be creative. I love ringside, but if you give me an opportunity to be creative with wrestlers, I'm 100% going to go that direction. But don't get me wrong, I love ringside. I love being there. But like my passion is to create the art with the talent there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you were just talking about like being creative and then being ringside. So like have you ever kind of maybe gotten like a little snidbit of maybe what somebody was planning in their match and you were like, "Okay, so now I know if they're setting up for that, maybe to go to that angle and then I'll get the best shot of whatever they're planning."
So that's a trick question. The best way that I can say is yes. Yes. I always try. Yeah, we'll just leave it at that part.
No,
I
no,
don't want to
it's
pull back the curtain too much, but yes.
yeah, no, it's totally fine. I totally get it. So like you've obviously have probably been to a bunch of shows across the Pacific Northwest.
Mhm.
So like what was like the biggest pop that you've ever heard a superstar get whenever they were making their entrance where it kind of made you look around the crowd like, "Wow."
Actually wasn't an entrance. The one thing that I will say is Reactivate has a smaller crowd, not because of who comes, but just the venue is a smaller crowd. But let me tell you, those fans make it seem like it's a stadium in there. They will meet, they are so loud, they'll chant. They are probably one of my favorite venues, the favorite fans. And also because I go there so often, I've developed a relationship with a lot of the fans. Shout out to Rocky, he's amazing. Um, so the biggest pop wasn't actually during an entrance, but I will say that it has to do, the biggest entrance is Thick Ricky um, in Richland. He is so over there. But it was when Funny Bone had a match with I don't remember who it was. I think it was actually Thick Rick. And they were just going in it and like everything that they were doing was like butter. And I say that because like the fans were so sold on it. They didn't care about anything else in that moment. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. And it was the first. This is such a cliche, but it was electrifying because like the hairs were standing up. Like I could feel the crowd going in, and like every like hit that they were hit, they would pop. There was holy shit chants, and that just I remember like putting the camera down for a second and looking around and thinking, wow, I am so lucky to be in this spot because if I'm feeling this, I can only imagine what those guys are feeling in the ring. And that I'll always hold. I'll have to go back and like look at what match it was because I think wasn't this show. It was like two before that, but yeah.
Yeah. So like when did you actually kind of sit there and have those thoughts to yourself where you were like, wow, like I'm actually a part of professional wrestling?
It's kind of like sometimes I think I like when I'm shooting, I feel like I am. Like when I'm at ringside, like setting up and talking to people, like I feel like I am. As soon as I step outside of that venue, I don't feel like I am. I don't. I feel like okay, I got to go edit pictures. So I guess it's kind of a weird question because I don't know. um,
Yeah.
I, I think that we're not necessarily talent in any means. Um, it's definitely a different feeling. I think I'm part of wrestling, but I don't feel like I'm in wrestling, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So like what is your like most favorite aspect of professional wrestling? Is it like the characters, the storylines, the agility, the moves? Like what is your favorite aspect?
The matches making me believe, forget that, whatever the storyline, I've never been storyline based,
Right.
like even as a fan, which is probably why I loved ECW so much because it's like we're just going to go into the ring and beat the shit out of each other and do some awesome stuff and have the crowd go absolute nuts. So that's the ability and just the match. Like when we think about wrestling, it's supposed to be a fight, right? And if you're able to take away that thought of like, oh, is it fake or is it this or was that planned? If you can get a fan to just totally lose themselves in that moment, in that match, that's when you know that those two people in that ring are really like doing their job, right? And
Mhm.
that's probably like what I like in professional wrestling. As far as a fan, as somebody who's working in the industry, it's the traveling, it's getting to meet the new people, even with the social anxiety. Like it's still it's the car rides, it's the people that you end up forming long bonds with.
That is so interesting. I know that there was definitely something that I wanted to bring up to you, and something that I brought up. I think it was with Max Burnside the last time that I had talked to him, and we were kind of talking about how professional wrestling transcends languages and countries. Like no
Hmm.
matter where you're from or how you speak, you can understand in-ring psychology. So like
Yeah.
what is your kind of mindset like behind that? Like what are your thoughts?
Are we talking about ringside psychology or how wrestling kind of like brings everybody?
Oh yeah. Yeah, how wrestling just brings everybody together.
The best way that I can say this is like I have merch shirts and like everywhere from Defy to like WWE, whatever. When I just like go to the store because I work downtown in Portland, whenever I walk to the store and get something, I always have somebody stop me and talk to me about something about wrestling. It may be totally off the wall, like comments or whatnot, but it's something that brings somebody together. Like I mean, I may
Mhm.
not agree with their theory or whatever they're saying or whatnot, but I'm not. Who am I to tell them different, right? Um, but it's something that everybody recognizes. Like from the wrestler standpoint, yes, they're absolutely correct. Like it, you can go from place to place to place, country, no matter the language, you're still going to understand the the dance, so to speak. As a
Mhm.
fan, I think it brings multiple people together all over the world. I mean, this is why we have so many like groups or wrestling groups that we pay attention to on Facebook. The fandom is so big, and I think that no matter what you go, if you see somebody with like a shirt or some type of merch, you're like, oh, that's my people. That's our community. So I think it's really cool. It's one of the few things that you have in life that can truly bring somebody together, even if you're on different sides of the of what you like.
Yeah. That is so interesting. So, like, have you ever like gone like outside of the United States, even if it wasn't for professional wrestling?
Oh yeah, I've been to Mexico to visit family and, or no, it wasn't. It was actually to go to Rocky Point. So yeah, but I've never been to like Canada. I've mostly done a lot of my traveling throughout the U.S.
Okay, very, very interesting. Well,
Mhm.
before we get to like the US and where you've traveled, is there anywhere in which you're like, I would mostly want to go to this place if I possibly could?
So if we're just talking about like vacation, anywhere where there's a nice beach where I can just play in clear water, absolutely. But obviously, like, if I get to shoot anywhere, it would be Japan. Like, I would love Japan.
Yeah.
I try. That's the one thing that I will try to consistently watch as a fan is Japan because I love the buildings there. I love. Me and Ricky were talked about this not too long ago. I guess it was a little while ago. How much we both like venues, and like he used to send me pictures of like different venues that he was at that were really cool. So yeah, like I always go towards what venue am I going to shoot at? Not necessarily country, state, or city, what venue. But Japan has some of the best ones that I have. And plus, it looks so cool to be there.
Yeah. That is so interesting. I know we were just talking about ECW earlier. So, like, what would it mean for you to be able to actually shoot some photos in the Hammerstein Ballroom?
Oh my God. WCW recently did a show there about 2 years ago. I would sell a kidney if like Brett would be like, hey, you want to come shoot at the Hammerstein Ballroom? Yeah, like, definitely, no matter what. This is going to be the first year I go to WrestleMania to go shoot, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, you're going to be going to WrestleMania next year?
WrestleMania week. I'm not actually going to wrestle
Oh,
like
okay.
WWE, but yeah, I'm definitely going to see if I can get booked at a few places. I've never done that, but I've always watched the well, not always. The last couple of years, I've watched the collective through EC or Fight TV or Thriller Plus, whatever it is now.
That is so interesting. So I know when I was watching your interview with Zay Perez, you had kind of brought up that you were going to San Diego, and then earlier you brought up that it was with referee Bradley. So like,
Yeah,
can you walk us through that whole trip?
yeah. So I was working in I was in the medical field at that time, and the reason that I bring that up is I had to work a 24-hour shift. I didn't have to, just nobody showed to their other shift, so I had to work it. I came home, slept 3 hours. We got in the car and drove 16 hours to go for, I think it was Finest City Wrestling. It was the first show back. I had no idea what to expect, but they had a huge crowd. It was awesome. Like uh, Judd Judge is actually coming from San Diego to here. He was the first death or hardcore wrestler that I was able to shoot. I was like, his back was all cut up. I was like, hey, do you mind if I get a few pictures of it? Um, we were both exhausted because we drove throughout the night. We had to go to the venue at like 5. I had to drop him off because he had to be there before me, obviously. It was just like so hectic. And then I got stuck in traffic. It was so stressful to get there, but I got there like 10 minutes before bell rang, and it was an awesome show. And went to the hotel very tired and slept. And then he had to go back to San Diego. I actually went to Arizona to go visit family for a little bit. So yeah, it was an awesome experience. It was quite a drive, and I would do it again.
That is so interesting. Yeah. I know the other night I was actually sitting there watching your interview with Zay Perez. And I know like you guys have had like multiple parts, but I couldn't help but notice that like you guys like it seems like you guys can essentially talk about anything. So like
And
how
we
is it
do.
have yeah. So like how is it having that connection with Zay?
Zane, I don't know how to quite describe it. Like he's that little brother that will say something and you're just like, no, you can't. That's not right. That's not what you're saying at all. Um, Zay has always been a really good friend of mine. We automatically clicked in class. Like I think he was like the third week in, um, and we were running, and he came up beside me and was like, "So who do you like in wrestling?" And I'm like, "I can't talk. I am running. The fact that you can is fine." But no, and then he was just telling me like who he liked, and I was like, "Oh, I like this person too," and we just kind of formed on that. As time kind of went on, we did kind of like lose touch, but it's also one of those friendships where like we would lose touch for long periods of time because he's busy, I'm busy, etc. But then we'll call each other like maybe every 3 months and be on the phone for like 4 hours. And that's just that, and that's a special bond that I will definitely have. And I think that when we also used to travel together when we'd go up for Defy for Ring Crew, and just like he's just hilarious. Just like with the Mira, there, it's just we laugh all the time, and I think that's what wrestling behind the scenes. That's what it is, and I think that's why I love it so much.
That is so cool. Yeah, I know that my mom absolutely loved your guys' whole segment where you guys were asking each other a random question. And she actually had a question for you that she wanted me to ask. And
Okay.
that is, what are your 3 celebrity crushes?
Oh wow. Um, that is actually a really hard question to answer because my tastes change like the wind changes. Um, and that's not just for like crushes, it's just, yeah. If I'm going to have to go with celebrity crushes. Um, I just watched a show. It was White Lotus. The main character, no, I didn't like him. Here's a jerk. We'll go with the typical one. We got to go with Chris Evans, Jason Momoa. Uh, I can't think of another one. Oh, can we add a wrestler in there?
Sure.
Jake something. Why not?
Take something.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I was sitting there watching that interview, and you and Zay were sitting there talking about your guys' favorite animals, and you had said something that like I'd never put into perspective before. You
Oh
said
my.
that your favorite animal was an elephant because elephants look at humans like humans look at puppies. And like that was just like, whoa. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's so funny. I remember it, that sounds very familiar. And I saw that you sent that over on the list. And I was like, did I say that? Is that something? Or is that just a fact? Because I know that was a fact that I saw on like TikTok or something random. And I was like, that's why. Like I would love that. Like I want to look at humans the same way that I look at Bubbo, snoring Bubba over here.
Oh, that is so awesome. So like are you still because like I've gone and looked at like Buckle Bomb Entertainment on
Mhm.
YouTube. Is that like a shared collaboration between multiple people or is that your YouTube channel?
No, that is a collaboration. It so originally I had was working at Comic Watch at the time. What we did was basically review comic books, and if you were lucky enough, they would put you on the cover of something that you said, which was always my goal. I got to do it 3 times, and then I was like, I started like phasing out of comic books and going into back to wrestling. And like I said, if there's nothing that I can't, if it's not something I won't like something if I can't be a part of it somehow. So I was like, you know what? I'll do a podcast. Why not? By the way, at that time, I had no idea what the fandom was like in the wrestling community, nor did I know about the amount of different types of podcasts that were out there at that time. And we're talking about 2020, I think. Um, so I was like, I talked to Comic Watch. I was like, hey, we need a Comic Watch division or wrestling division. A lot of other comic book, like comicbook.com was starting to cover wrestling, and they're like, okay. And to be honest, just I didn't really. They went under new management, and I didn't like them, like flat out. Like I thought they were condescending. I was like, I'm not doing this, and I brought 3 people with me to do Comic Watch, which was going to be this writing and trying to do a podcast with it. Um, and I was just like, you know what, this isn't working. We're going to go our own ways. Um, and by the way, Comic Watch itself, there's so many good people. Like I'm not talking even crap about the person who took it over at the time. They were great, but like we just butted heads. We didn't like each other, and that's okay. Like it was fine. So from there, and then we kind of sat there and we brought Daniel in with Sarah Orlando, and we're like, hey, let's just talk about wrestling. We do it all the time in chat. Like maybe somebody will like it. It was never to get popular. It was never to make money. It was just an outlet for us to create a safe community for everybody. Because one thing we weren't going to tolerate is hate against like anybody, let alone the LGBT community. And we noticed in a lot of groups that was happening.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to create a safe place for everybody. Like, I don't care if you dislike somebody, but just don't yuck somebody else's yum. And that's
Yeah.
something that where we just kind of headed towards it. And that's kind of where it went. Sarah kind of spearheaded it all. Like, at that time, I was already a little burnt out on creating it, and she was like, "I'll do it." And then I was like, "All right, let's do this, and I'll be able to provide like an appearance. Like, I'll do whatever you want me to do, as far as like talking and stuff." And she really did it, and she's an amazing. Thank you, Sarah.
That is so cool. So, like, before you actually started any type of professional wrestling training, was there any like envision in your mind of like exactly what you wanted to do in professional wrestling? And can you kind of like explain to us maybe what you were thinking?
The first time, like when I was 18, it was like, oh, I'm going to be a huge star or whatever. You don't know anything at that time. I didn't know anything at that age. The second time is I wanted to prove something to myself that I'd be able to do it and that I'd be able to be successful. Was it ever to get into like WWE or anything? No, it was really just to do a lifelong goal and to be a representation of people who are a little bit older. Like, I wasn't 20, I was in my 30s at the time. And like, I wanted to be like, hey, we still can do this. Like, and also as a bigger person. So I was like, I can do it. And I did it. I just doing it. But yeah, so that's kind of where that went. And yeah, of course, like I had like a gimmick already picked out and everything. Like, had a direction where I was going, but I just wanted to do the indies and like be a small representation of like, hey, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, you can do it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that is kind of lost out there in the world is that when people look at professional wrestling, they see just how hard like it can be, and then that's where people are like, I don't know if I can actually do it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's sometimes when you have to have a conversation with yourself and think that maybe this isn't, because wrestling is hard.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not just hard on your body, it's also kind of a mind fuck in many ways. Sorry, I don't know if you can cuss
No,
on
go
here.
ahead.
But yeah, like it is because you're training with your peers who are amazing, and we all look out for each other. But at the same time, you're like judging yourself against them. Like, are they able to do the same thing? I can't do the same thing that they're doing that way. And
Mhm.
it's just like you're in a constant battle with yourself. So you have to be mentally strong as well, not just physically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like can you kind of like walk us through maybe an experience where you were going on like a long car ride and you just had just an absolute blast? Can you walk us through one of those experiences?
Oh my God. Anytime that I am going in to reactivate with Stevie Bay Knox and Marcus Ertz, like those two are hilarious. A lot of times we'll bring up, or we brought up Fidel a couple of times. Have you ever had a McGangbang?
What?
Okay, exactly. So on our first trip, um, I have Marcus and Stevie in the front, and I was in the back, and they're like, "Hey, have you ever done a McGangbang?" And I was like, "Excuse me," and I was like, "Mind your business." No, and then so it's actually a food. So you get like a hamburger and a chicken, and you put it together, and it's a McGangbang. So that's actually become, yeah, I don't know, but apparently it's a
I've
thing.
always heard that as a McDank.
It could be. It could be under several different monarchies, but definitely a McGangbang is what I was introduced to on my first trip with them. And
Oh
ever
my
since then, I'm like,
gosh.
oh my God, these are my people. So we always have a good time. Another road trip that I will share that we had to stay overnight in a hotel. I won't give you the name of the person, but we had to. We had like a full hotel room. Like, we had people sleeping on the floor, everywhere. And a sex commercial came on. It was like at 11 o'clock. We had just broken down for the ring crew. And a sex commercial with sex toys was coming up, and a certain individual didn't know like what certain things were. So we're all having to explain it to them while everybody is cracking up laughing because like I'm just like I'm just like, yeah, oh, this is what this is for, this is what that's for, and then they're laughing because I'm just doing it very
Oh
like
my
medically, like
gosh.
no like moans about it. So that was something that I always remember, and to this day is something that we'll bring up and just like say one thing about it and just start cracking up because it was one of those things. So I mean, I
That is
have a
so
lot of
awesome.
stories that make me laugh that I probably can't think of, but like there's if you can get in the road, get in the car, go to shows, you'll have a blast.
That is so awesome. Well, as like a final question before we actually end up closing everything out. So like
Yeah,
what can we actually expect from the future when it comes to Seven?
that is really a good question that I ask myself every day. Honestly, I just want to shoot. I want to like I have done a lot of ringside. I really want to start working on the creative aspect of it. Brad and John are giving me this great opportunity at Pacific North Death, where I'm going to be able to start being that way, and I really, really want to start branching out to that, and also like doing photo shoots. Like I just did a photo shoot with Stevie. We had a blast. We just randomly went downtown and just like shot, and some of the things came out really cool. I really like them, and I love being creative. So if you're out there and you want to get creative, like I really love really love horror type things, grunge. Like I'm all for it. Whatever you want, we can.
That is so awesome. Well, I just want to thank you for actually sitting down with me here tonight and letting me just pick apart your mind for a little bit. Like it has been
Yeah.
an absolute pleasure to sit down with you.
Likewise, likewise.
All right. Well, I hope you have a very, very good night and I hope to see you soon. Hopefully, you come back to Independence.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, all right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast interview with Seven Alexander. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503